Welcome to your 20-minute podcast with David Brower, where we do our best to give you useful information in 20 minutes or less. Now, here's your host, 5-time Voice Arts Awards nominee, David Brower.
Thanks, Ellen. This is David Brower with our special guest from Belgium today, Bob Van Laerhoven, and he's a fascinating writer, author, celebrated book winner, if you will, lots of awards, lots of travel, lots of interesting stories. And Bob, welcome to the show. It's great to have you here.
Thank you very much, David. It's nice to be on your show.
I appreciate that. So you made your debut in 1977, it says, as an author of short stories, in 1985 as a novelist, and then 35 novels later, most of which are action-packed. You've become a master of suspense. But beyond that, you've traveled all over the world in some pretty dangerous places to find stories for your books, haven't you?
Well, you see, now that I've reached the humble age of 66.
You're just a kid.
If only I could feel that way. I noticed that I'm looking back over my shoulders more and more, and to understand why I made these often rather dangerous travels. And I think it was because I am fascinated by humanity, by the strange race we are, posing a threat not only to each other, but also to the whole planet. And the madness, the inherent madness of the human condition has always fascinated me. And I thought, when I was younger, I thought I could see the source of that madness in conditions of war.
Wow.
But the more countries that I visited in conflict countries, the more flabbergasted I became, because the source of what makes us such a dangerous race is still, after all these years, after more than 30 years, David, is still even much more a mystery to me than when I started traveling in the hope that I could unravel this riddle.
Well, and the riddle has been around for generations and generations and generations, and it just changes, doesn't it? It just changes locations. It just changes politics. Different, we got to have a reason for a war, so let's go have a war. It's just mind-boggling to me.
Well, that was the reason why I started these journeys and why I started writing. I am a son of a farmer, of a humble Flemish farmer who has never visited even the sea, which was 35 kilometers away from us.
Gotcha.
And I, as the son of my father, I have traveled the world seeking for that solution. I knew, of course, that I wouldn't find a solution, but for answers to the questions I was harboring. And the result is that I'm more riddled at this moment than I was ever before.
I was going to ask you, I would think you probably found more questions than you did answers, right?
Yes, but that is so frustrating,
Yeah.
I've searched answers. Sometimes I'm not going to exaggerate. When you're traveling in war zones, you try to be as safe as possible.
You bet.
Of course, in those 13 years that I've visited conflict countries, there were circumstances that posed a great danger to my own life. That was unavoidable. So
I would think so, yeah.
So the drive to do that was the curiosity of what are we, who are we, and isn't it so that that sounds maybe a bit pompous, but isn't it so that the human race is a failure? is a mistake of nature, of God, of who knows who. Oh, no, who.
It doesn't sound pompous at all, Bob. It sounds extremely curious, extremely challenging, extremely dangerous, and there had to be some. I would think, I don't know this, but I would think at times you had to feel somewhat fearless in order to go into some of these places.
If I may say so, David, it was just the other way around.
Okay.
I was always very, very afraid, but the more I was afraid, the more I was urged to go further and further and to take even more risks. Fear was like a push in the back for me.
Well, and I could see where it would also be a bit of protection for some sense, because when you have fear like that, you become extremely cautious, extremely alert about your
Indeed,
surroundings, right?
indeed, indeed. And a couple of times that has saved my life. I took risks. I knew that, and I took some risks that were on the verge of madness afterwards. But you only realize that afterwards.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And
What's the old saying? Hindsight is 20/20, right?
hindsight is 20/20 true.
So you were in Bosnia, Sarajevo, all kinds of different places. And part of the conversations and the journeys, you work with Doctors Without Borders.
Yeah.
You were in Somalia, Liberia, Sudan, all kinds of places. And many of these trips, conversations led, if I read this correctly, led to your book, Testimony to a Mass Murder. Is that right?
Yes, yes. Testimony of a Mass Murder is about the destruction and the mass murder on a region in Serbia at the moment of the Bosnian Wars.
Wow.
That was populated by Muslims, and some 8,000 of them were killed by the Serbian army.
Wow.
Under the direction of General Mladic. But it was it was kept very secret at that moment. You must realize, David, that it was the first mass murder after the Second World War that happened in Europe.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah.
So it was kept very, very quiet. It was an inhospitable region, a very hilly and mountainous region of Serbia, of a part of Serbia, and all things were done to keep the lid on this mass murder.
Well, and here in the States, we would only hear what the news would allow us to hear, and the news would only allow us to hear what they heard, which obviously wasn't the full story. And so the full story, in effect, can be found in your book.
Yes, but that was because I had the participation and the help of Doctors Without Frontiers. They knew about the mass murder in Srebrenica. Srebrenica was the name of the town where the most murders were committed.
Wow.
And it was with their help that I could come as close as possible to Srebrenica, where fugitives, not all inhabitants of Srebrenica were killed, of course, although they tried.
Right.
A few of them could escape, and it was those fugitives that I could interview very near to the town where the mass murders had been committed.
Wow.
So I had to, but it's very weird to say it like that. I had the chance to bring it on the surface because I was very, very close to the atrocities themselves.
Well, you were in the right place at the right time.
At the right time.
Right. Yeah.
But it didn't feel right, I can assure you. I mean,
understood. Yeah.
It was a very emotional and very confronting situation, not only because we ourselves were in danger, but we were reminded by the interviews we did with the fugitives of Srebrenica
Mm-hmm.
of the fate they had escaped. So we were there as Europeans, as Western Europeans, afraid for our own hide, if I may put it like that.
Absolutely right.
And we
Yeah.
were talking to people who had witnessed far worse, far more determined for their life. I spoke with women who had lost their husbands, with children who had lost their parents, and so on and so on, while keeping one eye on the road, if I can put it like that,
Correct. Yeah.
to see if the Serbian army wasn't coming towards us. So it was a very confronting situation.
Absolutely. So when here in the States, we often hear when we have our service people come back from Afghanistan or Iraq or wherever somebody has really any kind of trauma, you always hear about post-traumatic stress, right? And I would think you couldn't avoid that.
You live in the delusion. I've lived for more than 13 years in the delusion that I was the one that escaped those PTSD, you call it, eh?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. 4 years after I stopped the travels in conflict zones when I was 52, if my memory serves me well. And 4 years afterwards, I suddenly landed in a truly heavy depression that first astounded me because I didn't connect the dots immediately.
Yeah.
I didn't have the feeling that it was triggered by the way I had led my life for 13 years. And I thought that it was how do you call it, the midlife crisis.
Yeah, I hear you, yeah.
After months of suffering, after months of emotionally suffering, consulted a psychologist. He opened my eyes almost immediately, and I was surprised. It was as if I had forgotten that I had a period behind me that was so strenuous and so hard on the nerves. It was as if I had pushed away that period. Someone else, not me, had done that.
I mean, I'm sure it had to catch you off guard after 4 years. It had to be like a shocking wake-up call, if you will, and to have the courage to go get some help to work through that. Hats off to you, man. Not everybody does that.
Thank you, but it cost me years. And
absolutely.
There's a word for that, dissociation.
Yes.
It truly is baffling to suddenly realize, but no, it wasn't someone else, it was me. I didn't dream it. The human mind is a mystery, David.
It really is. It really is. You've got a ton of books out there. I'm most fascinated by them. Return to Hiroshima, Baudelaire's Revenge, if I'm saying that properly.
Yeah, you do.
Dangerous Obsessions. These are all intriguing books at first appearance, suspense and some truth to them. Where did the writing start? What initiated back in the day when you said, I think I'm going to write a book? Where did that come from?
Out of nowhere.
I love that.
Out of nowhere. And I still, when I open one of my books, I still am surprised and I think, as a writer, I'm more wise, more intelligent, more empathic as in daily life.
Yeah.
Sometimes you should, of course, I don't mean it completely that way, but sometimes you would suspect that the books I've written, and well, there are quite a few of them, have been channeled not, of course, by aliens or whatever, but I think the subconsciousness of a novelist is very active and is guiding you in a certain direction. I started all my novels. I started with one phrase, the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Never knew where it would end. I never have constructed a storyline or a storyboard in my whole life. And those novels are quite not only suspenseful but also layered. So they are not the easiest novels around. And still, I never made a storyboard. I never knew where I would come up and write towards the end.
And what strikes me about that process is some of the greatest songwriters in history, you know, from Tchaikovsky to the Beatles to the Stones to you name it. I mean, their process of writing amazing music is not unlike your process of writing amazing books. You know, they get I read a story one time about a musician. He woke up in the middle of the night. He heard a guitar chord in his head. He turned on his recorder, played the guitar chord of about 10 seconds, went back to bed, got up the next day, and wrote a #1 song in about 10 minutes.
I would like to have the opportunity to write a book in 10 minutes.
Well, yeah, I think a 3-minute song and a book are two different animals.
I need a bit more time. About a year per book.
There you go. Well, some of your books have been very well recognized. Your Baudelaire's Revenge is won an award for the Best Book Award in the thriller category. Dangerous Obsessions has been featured in many magazines. It's fascinating, the stories that you are able, I believe in channeling, the stories that are channeled through you, and you become the voice to be able to put those words on paper and share those stories, be them true, be them fiction, be them suspense, be them whatever. Your talent and ability is, my gosh. And to have many of them translated in many different languages too, right?
Yes, in about 10 languages.
Yeah.
I've been to Dangerous Obsessions is now very, very recently translated into Chinese.
Oh my gosh.
Yes, I received the cover 3 days ago, and it will be published next month.
That's fabulous. Wow.
It's also a bit strange because the stories in Dangerous Obsessions, I suspect that in China they will be labeled as subversive.
Well, sure, that would make sense, huh? Wow.
But I don't understand how they have received permission to translate those stories, because the Chinese government has a rather tight lid, I should say.
That's a polite way to say it. Yeah.
That's I'm a Flemish people are always polite, David.
Hey, Bob, it's been a real pleasure. Folks, you can find his books on Amazon.com and all kinds of, it's just fascinating to me. Just look for Bob. You spell his last name. It's Bob and then V-A-N and then L-A-E-R-H-O-V-E-N. So Bob Van Laerhoven. Bob, it's been an absolute pleasure, a real honor to speak with you, and I wish you continued success and much happiness being a young man in his 60s.
You make me blush, David. You truly make me blush.
Listen to Your 20-Minute Podcast with David Brower on the go. Downloads are available on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, any podcast app, and on our website at davidbrowervo.com/Your 20-Minute Podcast. Until next time, thank you for listening.